Well, we got some big news coming out of Happy Valley today as they fall in the college football playoff and then quickly have a bunch of things break their way and break against them. We also have a couple of notes on the national championship game, just a little bit of a hint, a taste of what we're going to get on Friday when we get the full national championship preview here on the channel. I'm also dabbling in some college football 25 content. It's just a little bit of a hobby thing that, I'm putting out there. If I'm going to be playing it in my free time, might as well try to produce content with it. This is the primary resource that I want on this channel, though. So if you like college football content and you want to talk college football all off season, make sure you subscribe, and while TikTok's still around, if it's going to hang around, certainly check me out over there. Got over 2,000 followers over there. That's been my biggest impact. If it goes away, it's going to be hurtful. So if you guys do like this, make sure you subscribe here on YouTube and make sure you add me over on Spotify if you found me over there. All right, enough of the chit chat. We're going to get into the weeds. We're going to talk about the Penn State Nittany Lions primarily today, and then we're going to touch, like I said, on that championship game. Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, they're both coming back to Penn State for another year. A lot of people out there were saying that they're not coming back because they don't trust in Drew Aller. A lot of people thought that they would either have one of the two or neither of the two come back. Not both of them, and both of them are coming back. Definitely huge news for that offense. Andy Kotelnicki's going to be back, going to be able to scheme around them, especially with the way that they were able to produce at the end of the year and in the college football playoff, in the Big Ten championship. With that being said, though, again, Andy Kotelnicki has to have a little bit of a look to himself, look in the mirror in the offseason, because a lot of times when Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen were having success running the football this year, he would go away from it. And he went away from it against Notre Dame. He went away from it against Boise State, and it cost them the Notre Dame game, in my opinion. When you talk about this Penn State team, they're going to be built around these two. I get you have a quarterback you're confident in. You had a playmaker in Tyler Warren this past year that you're going to be, wanting to lean on and get the ball in his hands. But generally speaking, given the combination of your big offensive line that was really getting a push on Notre Dame and the dynamic ability of these two running backs, that needs to be your strength, and especially both of them going into their senior year. They've been the starters ever since they were freshmen. When they got to Penn State, the running back room was really a mess over there. And Kaytron Allen, Nick Singleton, as freshmen, both of them played quickly and were very effective. Now we're going to be in a fourth year with these two guys starting. They decide, both of them, forego the NFL draft, and they're going to need to get probably about 15 touches each per game. And the big reason why, too, is you look at this Penn State team, you see a wide receiver room that you can't be that confident in. They've tried to address it. We're going to start with the guys that are coming back. Obviously, Trey Wallace, Liam Clifford. You're going to have Amari Evans back, and then Caden Saunders. Caden Saunders, a big disappointment, a four-star kid in Ohio State's backyard, and Ohio State didn't pursue him. There's a reason for that. He has not lived up to the hype that Penn State fans wanted him to be at, similar to Julian Fleming this past year, where he comes from Ohio State, and people are like, oh, he's coming back home. He's going to make an impact. No. Ohio State processed him out to get a kid like Jeremiah Smith on the field, Carnell Tate on the field. And you saw Carnell Tate have a big day against Texas, leading receiver for the Buckeyes. Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, they've had their moments. Liam Clifford, they've had their moments, but they haven't shown up in the big moments. They've been locked down in the last 2 years by teams like Michigan and Ohio State for 2 matchups and Notre Dame in the college football playoff. 0 receptions for wide receivers is absurd. That should never happen for a college football playoff team and for a team with the caliber and the resources of Penn State. It's just absolutely ridiculous. You need one of these players to step up. You've seen moments from Trey Wallace. You've seen the deep threat ability from Amari Evans. You've even seen moments from Caden Saunders and Liam Clifford. Can they show up in the big moment is going to be the big question for Penn State next year. But they also addressed it, adding players at that wide receiver position. They got a couple of wide receivers that they were able to recruit. Number 36 wide receiver from Portsmouth, Virginia. So they're hitting the DMV here with Matthew Alden. And then they're also going to New York, Brooklyn, New York. No relation, by the way, for any of you Ohio State fans out there hearing this name, Lyric Samuel, and he's from Brooklyn, New York, where Curtis Samuel's from. There's no relation there, just to make that clear. But the number 62 wide receiver, and they also got the number 63 wide receiver, all 3 4-stars in Jeff Exener. He's a Baltimore kid. He's a pretty talented kid, but if any of those 3 can really flash and try to push one of these older guys to make plays, that'll be big time for them. They also, by the way, I would be remiss to say that they do have the number 55 overall player in tight end, Andrew Olesh, who's coming in. That's going to be impactful for sure. But again, if you're Penn State, you're like, okay, we already have it with the tight end position, right? You do believe that Dinkins is going to be a pretty good player. We saw it with Tyler Warren. We know that we have Andrew Olish coming in, who's a really good player. What are we going to do out wide? Because if the plan is a freshman who none of those guys are in the top 30 of wide receivers from the 2025 class, what is the plan? The plan is you're going to look at Devontae Ross coming in from Troy. But the thing about Penn State fans is they could be saying to themselves, but we added Dante Cephas a couple of years ago from Kent State, and that didn't work out. And that's a similar situation. I think the big thing that they're going to be leaning on is Kyron Hudson coming in from USC. That's going to be big. And he's, again, another player, a lot like the players that they already have, who's shown flashes. We all remember that fantastic catch against LSU. He played big time in a lot of different moments. I believe he played pretty big time against Michigan, and I think he went out with an injury. I can't remember for sure. But Kyron Hudson has shown moments. The question is going to be, can he develop to be that alpha, the wide receiver 1? Because that's the real big thing that Penn State is missing. Amari Evans can be complimentary. Same with Trey Wallace. Same with Caden Saunders and Liam Clifford. All of these guys can complement a true alpha. But if you're a Penn State fan, you need either Kyron Hudson to be that absolute alpha, or you need for one of those guys, in particular Trey Wallace, who was supposed to be the alpha, to really take that leap. And if that can happen, this offense is going to be electric. Now we got to talk about that defense, though. Big time news for Penn State. Tom Allen's out the door. Yeah, 1 year, and he's gone. 1 year, you hired him from Indiana. Kurt Cignetti takes over for him, does an amazing job, and Tom Allen does an amazing job replacing Manny Diaz on that defense, who, of course, Manny Diaz took that Duke job and did a fantastic job over at Duke. And before I get to the Penn State impact of it all, I want to talk about Clemson for a brief second, and Dabo Swinney coming in and just wrecking the world of James Franklin and wrecking the Big Ten here. Dabo Swinney has done a fantastic job adjusting finally. See, we're going to give Dabo Swinney a whole lot of crap, and a whole lot of problems are going to come up with transfer portal and the coaching staff handling after Brent Venables left and Tony Elliott left and all of that stuff. But he finally is starting to get it right. When Brandon Streeter was an absolute disaster, he did go out and get Garrett Riley. And, you know, it looked like in the first year with Garrett Riley, the 23 season, it wasn't looking like Garrett Riley was really letting it loose with his offense, but it looked more like a Garrett Riley offense this past year. And you saw Cade Klubnik really take a big leap. And then You go out now and get Tom Allen to replace Wes Goodwin, a major upgrade right there. They're still recruiting at a pretty high level, and they're finally using the transfer portal, very minorly so, but they're still doing more than they were doing. I'm not saying Clemson is going to get back to where they were, though it's a possibility. Dabo Swinney has shown the ability to build a program in the past. At the very least, if you're a Clemson fan, you can have the confidence that things are changing for the better. Whether better is going to be competing for a national championship or just more consistency on every single Saturday. You're not going to have those depth issues that showed up on the defensive line in the front seven, where Texas was able to run all over you, but they couldn't really run the ball in the next two playoff games against Arizona State and Ohio State. Like, especially the Arizona State game, if you're a Clemson fan, you're thinking, we have more talent than Arizona State, but they have more depth. Why is that? And it's because simply the way that Dabo Swinney has worked. Now he's starting to work in the opposite direction, just a little bit, and that's all you need. And you get Tom Allen, who's going to be much better from a scheme perspective than Wes Goodwin. Wes Goodwin and Brandon Streeter were both promoted because they came up through the Clemson system. And Dabo Swinney was always going to be very loyal to his guys, players and coaches alike. At some point, Dabo Swinney figured out, I either need to fix it or get out of Dodge. And I think he's fixing it. Wes Goodwin was doing a good enough job that he could justify keeping him around for another year, but Brandon Streeter was doing horrible, and so they replaced Brandon Streeter, and now they're replacing Wes Goodwin after the defense was the problem. So if they can get more consistency on both sides of the ball and have balance, they're going to be a dangerous team going forward, especially in an ACC that does not look like it's going to be a super threatening conference where you're going to have that top team. I mean, they won the conference this year with the problems that they had. But the problem for Clemson is going to be making sure that they can compete more at a top-end level. They don't get ran off the field against Georgia. They don't let Texas run for 300 yards on them. And even South Carolina was able to beat them. They cannot let that stuff happen. They got to compete at a higher level. And they also need to make sure that that random loss to Louisville does not happen. As far as Penn State goes, I don't really know where the fit is for James Franklin, but generally speaking, he has gone with an outside hire with a lot of these moves on both offense and defense. So a lot of Penn State fans, Adam Brenneman, a big one right there, they're going to talk about those two outside hires being Jim Knowles and Al Golden. More on that in a second. There's also the promotion from within. I don't see Franklin doing that just simply because that is not historically what he did. He could have even done that on the offensive side of the ball last year, but he didn't end up doing that. After they fired Mike Yurcich last year, I forget who exactly it was. It's slipping my mind right now who it was, but I'm familiar with the coach. He was a running backs coach, I believe. It's slipping my mind right now, but they were better on the offensive side of the ball after Mike Yurcich left, and they still went outside and hired Andy Koldenecki to be able to correct it, and their offense was better this year. The defense is a little bit different because similar to when Manny Diaz left for the Duke job, you got to try to keep and make sure that continuity is going to stay there with that defense, because that defense has been an anchor and really good for years at Penn State. Manny Diaz left and you were able to plug in Tom Allen, and Tom Allen was really wanting to be there because of guys like Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton and Keziah Izzard. And, you have Dominic DeLuca, those two safeties when you got Reed and Wheatley back there. They're really good too. But now the personnel might not be as advantageous. You're going to need a really good coach. And the question is where will he go with this? Outside hire, Joe Rossi from Michigan State is one that I heard that's more reasonable. Jim Knowles, you don't have the money to outbid Ohio State for Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles is going to get what he wants from Ohio State. He's not going anywhere. And certainly Al Golden's not going anywhere. Adam Brenneman. Like, I don't know why there's a perspective that Al Golden would leave Notre Dame, especially because they have a lot of young players that have had to step in due to injury. When you have a guy like Benjamin Morrison coming down, who's coming back, by the way, when you have a guy like Riley Mills go down in the middle, you're going to have to replace them with younger players. And sure enough, they have depth. That's a big reason why Notre Dame is in the national championship and somebody like a Georgia, for example, is not, because they have depth. Notre Dame has major depth. Al Golden is not going anywhere. If you're a Penn State fan, don't get your hopes up. Don't get your hopes up. Al Golden is one heck of a coach, and he's going to have one heck of a challenge in the national championship game against Ohio State. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are a man-centric team. Man-centric. And Texas was a zone-centric team. Texas went a little bit more conservative than they normally do. They played a lot of quarters coverage and a little bit of bracket coverage on Jeremiah Smith. It wasn't as bad as a lot of people are saying, but stylistically, that's just not the type of receiver that Jeremiah Smith is. You're going to see Emeka Egbuka eat more against zone than you are going to see Jeremiah Smith eat against zone. You're going to see Jeremiah Smith eat a lot more against man coverage. And the thing about Notre Dame is you have Benjamin Morrison, who absolutely locked down Marvin Harrison Jr. the last time we saw that matchup back in 2023 in that thrilling game that went right down to the wire. Jeremiah loves saying that before the Ohio State-Texas game, we want Ohio State to win because we felt like that game slipped away. We felt like we should have won. And we want the best team as well. That they got what they asked for. Jeremiah, you got what you asked for. But the challenge that you asked for is for Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and Jordan Clark to be put into situations against possible future first-round wide receivers and putting them on islands. I'm aware that the safeties over the top, Schuler and Watts, are going to be really good. They're going to be ball hawks. They're going to help be an eraser in man coverage. But how much do you think that eraser method is going to work? When you look at the games that Ohio State's offensive output has struggled, it was Texas, Michigan, and Nebraska. Those were the two things that they had. Dominant defensive tackles. Riley Mills is hurt. We already covered that. They're not as dominant without Riley Mills as they were prior to his injury. And he's going to be out for this game, is my assumption. If he can go, that's going to help Notre Dame a lot. But the other thing they were able to do was dare Ohio State to play it slow. And finally, they were able to play it slow against Texas. They had adjusted. They were better against Texas than they were against Michigan. The only big difference was Ohio State kept shooting themselves in the foot with penalties. You really think that from that game ending on Friday night to next Monday, a week from today, Ohio State's not going to clean up those penalties? Oh, they're going to clean up those penalties, so you're not going to get the benefit that Texas had where Ohio State's going to shoot themselves in the foot constantly. And you're not going to have the benefit of being a zone identity team. So does my big question for you Notre Dame fans out there, does Al Golden pivot to try to shut down this Ohio State offense, or does he stick with his strength? Because I'm telling you this, Buckeye fans and Buckeye coaches are both out there like, please put Leonard Moore on Jeremiah Smith. Please put Leonard Moore on Jeremiah Smith. Please put Jordan Clark or Christian Gray on Jeremiah Smith. See what happens. See what happens. Freshman versus freshman. I had a Notre Dame fan in a TikTok live try to say that freshman versus freshman. Leonard Moore on Jeremiah Smith is the approach. The issue with that is Jeremiah Smith is not a normal freshman. We have not seen a freshman wide receiver like Jeremiah Smith since maybe Julio Jones, and we've all established that. I don't know how man coverage without Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame slows down that Ohio State passing attack. So I think it's in Al Golden's best interest to pivot, try to play more conservative, lean on zone, dare Ohio State to dink and dunk down the field. And that still might be effective. It was effective against Texas. The only other thing that you can hope for if you are Al Golden is keep up with the aggression that he normally has and just hope that Will Howard's having a bad day. Hope that that run game and that offensive line cannot get going, and hope that Jeremiah Smith is at least not going to kill you in the end. That is going to be the plan for Notre Dame. It's one of those two things, and the latter is probably what Al Golden's going to do. So if they keep up with their identity, might be a long day for Notre Dame. But thank you guys for tuning in to this show. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. We'll be back tomorrow with some more news.